October 1972. A plane carrying a rugby team flies toward the Andes Mountains. On board are 45 people, players, friends, family members, and crew. It's supposed to be a short trip from Uruguay to Chile. But somewhere over the mountains, something goes terribly wrong. The aircraft disappears into the clouds, and seconds later, slams into the side of a mountain. When the wreckage finally stops sliding down the glacier, the survivors are stranded 11,710 feet above sea level, in one of the most remote places on Earth. There are no roads, no vegetation, no animals, just snow, rock, and endless mountains. And soon, the survivors will face a decision so disturbing that many people still struggle to understand it today. Because if they want to live, they will have to eat the dead. The journey begins on October 12, 1972. A group of young rugby players from Montevideo, Uruguay, are traveling to play a match in Santiago, Chile. Along with teammates, several family members and supporters join the trip. Altogether, there are 45 people aboard the aircraft, including 5 crew members. Flying commercially over the Andes is expensive, so the team charters a small Uruguayan Air Force Fairchild FH-227D instead. Among pilots, the aircraft has a reputation. It's sometimes called the lead sled because of its heavy weight and engines that struggle in thin mountain air. But the passengers don't know that. To them, it's simply a cheap flight to an exciting weekend. When the plane reaches the Andes, bad weather forces it to land overnight in Mendoza, Argentina. The storm clears the next morning. So, on Friday, October 13th, the flight takes off again. Inside the plane, the mood is relaxed. Players joke with each other. A rugby ball is tossed down the aisle. One of the players, Nando Parado, even gives up his window seat so a friend can enjoy the view of the mountains. He has no idea that this small decision will soon save his life. As the plane crosses the Andes, turbulence begins to shake the aircraft. At first it's mild, then it grows stronger. Passengers start noticing something unsettling. The mountains outside the windows look uncomfortably close. Inside the cockpit, the pilots are relying mostly on instruments because thick clouds block their view. They believe they have already passed the highest peaks, so they radio air traffic control and report that they will reach Santiago in 1 minute. But they are wrong. They are still 11 minutes away from clearing the mountains, and the plane is already descending. Suddenly the clouds break. Directly ahead is a dark wall of rock, a mountain ridge. The pilots immediately push the engines and pull the nose up, trying to climb. But the aircraft doesn't have enough power. At 13,800 feet, 4,200 meters above sea level, the plane slams into the ridge. The impact rips the tail section off the aircraft. Passengers seated in the back are thrown out into the mountains. Seconds later, the wings break away as the plane strikes another slope. What remains is the front section of the fuselage, a shattered metal tube filled with survivors. The wreckage begins sliding down the glacier like a sled. Miraculously, it avoids rocks and cliffs as it races downhill. Finally, the fuselage grinds to a stop at 11,710 feet, 3,570 meters. Inside, the scene is horrific. Seats have torn loose. Passengers are piled against the cockpit. Some people are screaming in pain. Others are already dead. Of the 45 people on board, 12 die immediately in the crash. But more than half the passengers are still alive, and they are now stranded deep in the Andes. Night falls quickly. Temperatures drop to minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 30 degrees Celsius. The survivors crowd inside the broken fuselage and block the open sections with luggage to keep out the wind. They assume rescue planes will find them within a day, but the mountains around them are vast and empty. Many of the surrounding glaciers don't even have names. During the first night, 5 more people die from their injuries. One of the survivors, Nando Parado, lies unconscious in a coma for 3 days. When he finally wakes up, he learns devastating news. His mother died in the crash. His sister is still alive, but badly injured. 10 days later, she dies in his arms. The survivors search through luggage for food. What they find is shockingly little. Just 8 chocolate bars, a tin of mussels, 3 jars of jam, a small tin of almonds, some candy, and a few bottles of wine. They ration everything carefully, but the food is gone within days. At high altitude and freezing temperatures, the human body burns enormous amounts of energy simply trying to stay warm. Soon everyone is starving. On the 10th day, they hear a message on a small transistor radio they recovered from the wreckage. Search teams have officially stopped looking for them. The outside world believes no one survived the crash. The survivors are completely alone. As the days pass, the hunger becomes unbearable. The small food supply they found in the luggage disappears quickly. At first, they try to ignore the hunger. Some chew on pieces of leather from their shoes. Others suck on cigarette filters or small bits of cloth just to trick their stomachs. But it doesn't help. Their bodies begin to weaken. Walking even short distances becomes exhausting. Some survivors grew dizzy when they stood. Others felt their thoughts becoming slow and foggy. They searched the surrounding mountains for anything edible. There is nothing. No plants, no animals, not even insects, only snow and rock. And scattered around the crash site, the frozen bodies of the people who did not survive. For several days, no one says anything out loud, but the thought is there. Finally, someone speaks. If we want to live, we have to use the bodies. At first, the idea horrifies them. Many of the dead were their friends, their teammates, people they had laughed with just hours before the crash. But starvation leaves little room for morality. One survivor later explained their thinking like this: "Our bodies were consuming themselves just to stay alive. Without food, we knew we would die." It was the only source of food available. They cut thin strips of flesh from the frozen bodies and placed them in the sun so they thaw slightly. Slowly, they accept the reality of their situation. And without that decision, none of them would have lived long enough to leave the mountain. Then, on day 17, the mountain strikes again. In the middle of the night, the survivors hear a thunderous roar. One of them later describes it as sounding like wild horses charging toward them. It's an avalanche. Snow explodes through the broken fuselage and buries everyone inside. 8 more survivors are killed instantly. The rest are trapped under the snow for 3 days, barely able to breathe. When they finally dig themselves out, only 19 survivors remain. Weeks pass. The survivors realize that waiting for rescue will only lead to death. Eventually, only 16 people are still alive. One of them, Nando Parado, decides there is only one option left. Someone must walk out of the mountains. On day 61, Parado begins the journey with Roberto Canessa and Antonio Vizintin. They carry supplies made from aircraft insulation and food prepared from human flesh. They believe civilization must be nearby. In reality, the nearest help is 37 miles, 59 kilometers, away. After 3 days of climbing, they reach the top of a mountain. Parado expects to see green valleys. Instead, he sees endless peaks stretching to the horizon. Vizintin returns to the crash site to save food. Parado and Canessa continue alone. After 8 days of walking, the 2 men reach a river where they spot a Chilean farmer on the opposite bank. They cannot cross the river, so they write a message and tie it to a rock. The note reads, "We are survivors of the plane crash. There are more of us in the mountains." The farmer rides for help. 2 days later, helicopters arrive in the Andes. On day 71, the first survivors are rescued. On day 72, the remaining survivors are lifted from the glacier. Out of the 45 people on the plane, only 16 survive. They spent 72 days trapped in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. They endured freezing temperatures, starvation, avalanches, and isolation. But they survived, even if it meant doing something the world would struggle to understand. Because sometimes, survival demands choices no human being ever hopes to face.